Next up, I want to invite George, who is going to speak on Under Earners Anonymous.
Under
Welcome.
Earners Anonymous. Hey, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, George.
Hey, George.
It's great to be here. Can't do this without you, and really appreciate this workshop and this retreat. I'm George. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic, sex addict, what else? Sex addict, nicotine addict, drug addict. I've been in AA ever since November the 14th, 1981.
Hi, George.
Hi,
George. Thank you. My dad was an alcoholic, and he got shot in the back by his second wife. She followed him home from World War II. He was a bomber pilot through 26 missions over Germany, and he came back and he divorced my mother and married his sweetheart he met in England, and she killed him. And I didn't know anything about it. My mother remarried, and she married into a adult child of an alcoholic. So I kind of grew up in the alcoholic culture, and I didn't know that. I married a woman who was a daughter of an alcoholic, and so in December 1970, what is it now? What was it? I'm forgetting. 1977. She left me and took kids, and I was just bereft. I mean, I was totally wrecked, and I cried out to God, God, if there's a God, help me. I'd grown up in church, I'm Episcopalian, but I didn't really have a relationship with Jesus, and so I had very godly grandparents, and so I guess they must have been praying for me. So somewhere along the line, God showed up. I saw the cross. I didn't know what to do about it, so I said, okay, I'll go. One thing led to another. I don't need to go into the details of it, but I ended up going to a place called West Georgia College and got a degree in humanistic psychology. I was going to try to figure out what had happened to me. I'd had a spiritual awakening. I didn't know what to do with it. And I'd go to churches and say, I had this thing happen to me. And they'd go, what do you mean? You know, they would want to turn it into their religion, or they would get away. I don't want to talk to you if you've had some kind of spiritual awakening. So I ended up with my degree in psychology, homeless on the streets of Atlanta, and I had my second spiritual awakening. I heard a voice say to me, have you thought about AA? I said, have you thought about, I actually heard a voice that said, have you thought about AA? And I go, no, I haven't thought about AA. And so I obeyed the voice. I called up AA Central Office there in Atlanta, and they said there's a meeting up the road here at Peachtree Street tomorrow night at the Presbyterian Church. So I went, and it was great, because when I walked in the door, I'd had this degree in psychology. I'd been through all these psychological experiences, and I walked in the door, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It was really wonderful. You know, AA's in the Bible Belt, so you get Bible Belt Christians in AA, and it's quite an interesting experience. And so that, just one night in an AA meeting, put me on the road back to Tampa. My aunt and uncle are headed down to Tampa, and they said, hey, we know you're homeless in Atlanta. Now you need some help. We'll ride you back to Tampa. So they drove me back to Tampa, and I ended up getting a job working at Axe Detox. I had a degree in psychology. I had no AA experience whatsoever, but I'm working as night manager at the AA Detox, and I don't know anything about AA. There's a guy named, one of these Spanish guys was talking about Jana. I said, what's a Jana? It was Yana, Y-A-N-A, You Are Not Alone Club. And I eventually ended up quitting that job because I wasn't really ready for it, and started going to Jana, and did 120 meetings in 90 days, and I got into the club. Well, I can't say I wasn't a hardcore alcoholic. I mean, I was an alcoholic and smoking marijuana. Anyway, but I quit smoking marijuana, I quit smoking cigarettes, I quit drinking alcohol. My problem was I didn't quit chasing women, so that went on for about the next 20 years. And I got involved in AA and SLAA. I finally left town to get away from my fatal love attractions, ended up in Atlanta and Washington, D.C., and finally got rid of my sex addictions. But anyway, let me see, degree in psychology. I came back to Tampa, and also I had different sponsors, but nobody was dealing with my problem. I had PTSD, and I didn't realize I had PTSD, but I had trauma from childhood and PTSD on top of it. And I went through some, how many people have ever the S training, the EST? We've been through S. Anyway, had gone through S. Then a couple of Episcopal priests. I was working in a rehab, and I think it was Care Unit in one of those places, and a couple of Episcopal priests were doing a thing called the Life Training, which is a spin-off of this. It's a weekend intensive where they basically take you through getting rid of your anger and then dealing with the resentments. And so all day Saturday's dealing with anger. What are you saying no to? And then what's your guiding belief that's driving you? Get rid of that, and then work through the resentments. And they did it a little bit differently. They would go, who do you resent? Why do you resent it? And what are you getting out of it? And what's it cost you? And then how do you actually forgive the people? It's a very powerful process. And so that became kind of core to my therapeutic process that I did with the alcoholics I was working with. I say all that because I at the same time I had heard that Werner Erhard was going over to Russia, carrying the S training over to Russia. And I said, that's awful, because it was real kind of existential, humanistic, kind of cultish. I said, I wonder if anybody's taken any AA to Russia. So I called up the New York Central Office like anybody would do. I said, hey, they said there's a guy named Bob Smith. He's taking people over to Russia. Do you want to go? And give him a call. So I gave him a call. Hey, yeah, I'm ready to go. You have to have the money by tomorrow. I need about $1,400. So it's $1,400. I mean, it could get you to Russia back in those days. Yeah, so I did that, and I went to Russia in 1986 and 1988, where they called the traveling group. It was put together for the Center for USSR Initiatives out in San Francisco. They called it Creating a Sober World. And so I met, we did some good stuff. We got some AA meetings started in Russia. And anyway, I came back from that, and I began to do these weekend intensive workshops just like I had been trained in. And I called them Creating a Sober World workshops. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. I ended up working in, you name it, ACTS, Detox, DACO. People here in Tampa know what DACO is, Drug Abuse Comprehensive Coordinating Office, Care Unit, Jeffrey Hills Correctional Institute, worked with the prison system for a while, and also ended up, as I became more and more spiritual and less, and the culture became, the culture of addiction became more and more politically correct. I ended up working for the Salvation Army as a counselor, and then program coordinator for the Salvation Army drug men's rehab center up on Nebraska Avenue here in Tampa. I hope I don't leave anything out here. Anyway, when Major Smith got transferred up to Hyattsville, Maryland, I went up to Maryland with him and was sharing, how I had put kind of, what had happened. And here's one of the things that happened with me working with the Salvation Army. Major now over in St. Pete had said, I want you to go down to the chapel, and I want you to check out to see what our theology is. I say, theology? Theology? Okay, theology. I had never thought about theology before, so I found out there's theology. So I went online and started studying theology. And I discovered that the AA path of recovery goes between the two basic theologies in our culture. There's two theologies that I call it choice and struggle. There's either Reformed theology, which is people never overcome their problems. They always struggle to the day they die with them. That's called struggle. And then that's Reformed. That's Calvinism, basically. And then there's a thing called Arminianism, which is you do get a choice. You get a hit from the Holy Ghost, and you can make correct choices. And so most people are living in this choice and struggle thing. But it turns out that I didn't know this, but Frank Buckman, this is when I ended up writing this book here. The Salvation Army up in Washington, D.C., the African American pastors are saying, how are you putting this together? How are you putting AA together with this recovery thing? I said, well, I'll write a book on it. So I wrote a book on it, but when I actually wrote the book on it, they really weren't interested in reading it. It was too hard for them to, whatever. And I discovered that you write books and people don't read them, and it's okay, because I write the book not for them. I write the book for myself. It's my journal. In other words, I'm praying every night, and sometimes about 3 o'clock in the morning I get a chapter, and I do the chapter and pray for it, and sometimes it may take a week or so, and I write another chapter, and it's the record of my spiritual growth. But anyway, I wrote my first book when I came back from Washington, D.C. It's called Absolutely Sober History, Principles, and Practice of Destruction of Self-Centeredness. I'm not here to sell books. I'm just here to share my recovery with you. But basically what it is Frank Buckman was a Lutheran pastor, Pietist pastor from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he went to Keswick in 1908, and he ran into a message that was preached by Jesse Finn Lewis. It was called the Centrality of the Cross. And basically the message of Keswick was, and you may not have heard this before, but basically they were preaching from Romans chapter 6. When Christ died on Calvary, we died with him. Therefore, reckon yourself to be dead. You're dead. And so that's what Frank Buckman got that message, but it's kind of hard for people to get that message. He starts working with students at Penn State University, and he tones it down some, and he instead of preaching the cross quite so strongly, he started having them measure their lives against the four absolutes. But basically the 5 principles of Keswick were, day number 1, you don't have a choice about it. You're in bondage to your sin. You don't have a choice about it. Day number 2 is reckon yourself to be dead. Number 3 was confess your sins to one another. Day number 4 was make amends. Day number 5 was, of course, pass the message on to other people, a 5-day conference. And of course, Bill Wilson took those, Frank put the 5 days and turned them into 5 C's, or 6 points, whatever. And then Bill Wilson took them and turned them into 12 steps. Anyway, so that was that book. And so so I got the vision for, my purpose in life began to be create a sober world. How do you make the addiction recovery conversation a global conversation? How can you become a world changer? I mean, you as a person in recovery kind of say, okay, I'll take on and carry the message to the whole world. Because I hear it in the rooms as we've been sharing, is that this is a conversation everybody needs to be part of. Everybody needs to be involved in the 12-step conversation. But what would you call it? So I just called it, I said, I'll call it Creating a Sober World until somebody comes up with a better name for it. That's what I'll call it. I'm creating a sober world one day at a time by the grace of God and the fellowship of the saints in recovery. So anyway, that's my project. But so I'm sitting around in 2012, 2013, 2014, I'm reading stuff. I don't know what to do next. I'd like to do this Creating a Sober World thing, and suddenly I get this idea, I should write a book about nothing. How did I get that idea? Bill Wilson said on page, how am I doing on time?
You got about 7 minutes.
On page 13, he says, at the hospital I was separated from alcohol for the last time, for treatment seemed wise. For I showed signs of delirium and tremors, and there offered myself to God that I didn't understood him to do with me as he would. And for the first time I admitted that of myself I was nothing. I go, nothing? I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen that somebody admit to being nothing. It turns out he also admitted to being nothing on page 75 of the 12 and 12. Many of us thought ourselves a religious world to the limitation of this attitude. Refusing to place God first, we had deprived ourselves of his help, but now the words, of myself I am nothing, the Father doeth the works. I think he's misquoting one of the Gospels where that's what he said. So I started writing a book about nothing. It took me 6 years to write this book about nothing, and I'm glad I did, because I came to know nothing in a way that I just, it's beyond really my comprehension how I did this. Frank Buckman had said, most of us thought ourselves religious. No, that was, I'm quoting, to be nothing. Okay, this listening to God is not the experience of a human. It's the most sane and normal thing a person can do. You begin to realize your own nothingness. And I had never really embraced my own nothingness like this, but it turns out that's what they did at Keswick, where Frank had gotten this. St. John the Cross, you had to reach satisfaction in all desires, possession of nothing, to come to possess all desire, the possession of nothing, to arrive at being all desire to be nothing. Well, I was writing the book, but I was beginning to get to the place where I couldn't. I didn't know if I was going to be able to finish it or not. And I fortunately stumbled across a thing on the internet about people who are addicted to failure. Addicted to failure? Yeah, there was a group up in New York City, and they were debtors who were not making enough money, and they said maybe the problem was not so much money, that they weren't managing their money, just weren't making enough, so they started a thing called Under Earners Anonymous. So I joined Under Earners Anonymous. And Under Earners Anonymous is very dysfunctional. It's a great fellowship. It's doing the same thing, it's just dealing with under-earning and under-being, just like we deal with alcohol, but at the leadership level, it's very dysfunctional because so many people have not hit bottom yet. And so I left for a while, and I had to come back because it was really great space. So I decided when I come back, I would start a group called Hitting Bottom and Under Earners Anonymous. So I wrote a book called Hitting Bottom and Under Earners Anonymous. And it's about, you know, I said, if people are going to get into service in UA, they need to memorize the first three paragraphs of 12 and 12. They need to embrace the absolute humiliation that the alcoholic has to embrace if he's ever going to get sober. And so I wrote that book, and so I've been in UA for a while, and so finally he said it's time maybe I should actually start writing my Creating a Sober World book. So that's what I'm writing now, is Creating a Sober World, a first century apostolic church for the 21st century. This is what Bill Wilson, how much time ago?
Just about 4 minutes.
Huh?
4 minutes.
Oh, wow. Bill Wilson said, there are those who predict that alcoholics may become a new spearhead for a spiritual awakening throughout the world. When our friends say these things, this is St. Louis, Missouri, 1955, they're both generous and sincere, but we of AA must reflect that such a tribute, such a prophecy could well prove to be a heady drink for most of us. Thus, we really came to believe this to be the real purpose of AA if we commence to behave accordingly. Our society, therefore, will prudently cleave to its single purpose, the carrying of the message to the alcoholic still suffers. Let us resist the proud assumption that since God has enabled us to do well in one area, we're destined to be channel setting place for everybody. So Bill really wanted to make sure that AA stuck to alcoholics and not got down the road, go try to fix everybody. But Lois reflected that, I believe as Bill did, that if we could find a way to give others what we had, we would begin something that would change the world. Bill and I always believe that as more and more people embrace our way of life and reach out in love to others, the principles upon which our fellowship will base will one day save our troubled world. I do believe that the only thing that will save our world is that more and more people come to take responsibility for the fact that our world's addicted. It's self-centered. And Frank Buckman also believed that. The fellow who preceded AA had also had a vision. And I won't read that because I know I'm getting low on time. I'm not trying to sell books. If anybody wants to buy these books, look at them. George McLaughlin, McLaughlin, Absolutely Sober, History, Principles, and Practice of Obstruction and Self-Centeredness. Right now I'm doing a Power Path, Habits of Practical Holiness. I'm working with some homeless addicts down in the inner city here, and some of them are AA members and some of them are church members, and some know how to talk AA talk. Some of them know how to talk AA talk. So I'm actually putting a little book together, and we're learning how to talk the thing together, you know, the 5 days of Keswick and the 12 steps. Anyway, we're having a lot of fun doing it. But if anybody wants to know more about this, you can sure take my phone number down. I'll give you my phone number. You can text me, and anyway, I'll actually take my number down. I'll give it to you. 813-727-1442. 813-727-1442. Does anybody have any questions? Anything you'd like to ask me? So I got another minute or two. Huh? Okay. I think I said everything I need to say. Let me make sure I had some notes here. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.